If you thought last season was deep,
You haven't heard anything yet.
this is Boots to Boots.
The moments where everything you thought you knew about yourself changes.
Because this is the stuff no one wants to talk about.
But it's what needs to be talked about.
Healing doesn't happen alone.
It happens through shared experience.
So lace up your boots.
Join the conversation.
We'll be talking to you.
Today on Boots to Boots, we're stepping into a conversation that is impacting communities across New Jersey.
Joining us is Senator Anthony Bucco, who represents the 25th Legislative District and currently serves as the Senate Republican leader in New Jersey. But today, this conversation is not just about politics. It's about the real decisions facing families, students, and taxpayers in New Jersey and what happens when policy meets everyday life.
So please welcome to Boots, Senator Bucco. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, we're so excited I feel like this conversation has slowly grown over the last few months. And for the Senate to reach out and ask if we would like to interview you, it's a dream come true for me. So thank you so much for having us.
Well, listen, it is my pleasure and an honor to be on. Actually, I spent yesterday afternoon in West Milford on this very subject. So I'm happy to sit down and talk about it with you today. We had a great conversation at the rally, and we're working hard to try to correct this school funding shortfall.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. Then we could just jump right into it then. And can you briefly explain what the Highlands Act was designed to do and why the Highlands Impact Aid was created?
Sure. So the Highlands Act was legislation that was enacted by the legislature, signed by the governor a number of years ago to help protect critical environmental resources, specifically drinking water. Most of the state's drinking water originates in northern New Jersey from reservoirs and aquifers. And the folks at DEP and the environmental folks around the state said, hey, we need to be careful to protect this supply of water so that the state can continue to enjoy it and that residents can continue to use it into the future. Because as you know, we are in many areas a densely populated state, and they wanted to control the development in those areas in order to protect those natural resources and the supply of water. But unfortunately, when you do that, and while that is a great goal, when you limit development, you also impact the municipality's ability to raise revenue through taxation. As municipalities grow and developments happen, additional tax ratables are put on the rolls. So the money that's produced by the taxes, the property taxes from those developments, go to school funding, go to county funding, municipal funding. And when you limit that type of development, you almost choke off that municipality's ability to fund those services. So as part of the legislation, they created the Highlands Impact Aid, which was supposed to be funded and then given to the municipalities that were told, hey, you have to sacrifice your development potential. So we're going to give you money to offset the revenue that you're going to lose. And that's why the Highlands Impact Aid was created.
So what do you feel has changed since the inception of the Highlands Act? And, obviously we have both talked so much about the financial struggles that school districts are facing, and not just in the Highlands, but all across of New Jersey because of the S2 funding formula. So what has changed within the Highlands Act that it's not conducive to these environments anymore?
Well, the problem is that the state pretty much reneged on its promises, right? While it promised these municipalities the Highlands Impact Aid to offset what they were losing in tax revenue, as the years went on, governors from both sides of the aisle didn't fund that impact aid in the budget. They essentially took that money and used it for other purposes. And that fund never grew in proportion to what it needed to how it needed to grow to cover those expenses that municipalities were losing. So now there's a big shortfall. And that's what's happening to school districts between the failed school funding formula S2 that we all recognized. Republicans have been saying this now for 4 or 5 years, that this funding formula is broken. You're now seeing the impacts of that broken formula on our school districts across the state. And that's impacted additionally by the loss of revenue for those municipalities that are in the Highlands or the Pinelands that limits development. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. They're getting cut both ways. And at this point, municipalities are being forced to lay off teachers, to close schools, to limit programs, which just isn't fair. Those municipalities sacrificed for the entire state to have a clean water source, but yet the state's not stepping up to backfill the amount of money that they're losing. And the towns just can't keep up.
Right.
No, and the towns are always going to be the ones that are affected by it as well, that are the ones fighting for it.
Yeah.
So some towns feel like they have been asked to carry that burden of environmental protection, and without receiving the support they were promised in the Highland Act. Do you feel that's fair?
Absolutely not. And they're right to be upset. That's why I've fought very hard for the municipalities in my district, especially Jefferson and West Milford. West Milford, 100% of the municipality is impacted by the Highlands Act. Jefferson is probably close to 90%. So they're really getting hit awfully hard. And we need two things to happen. We need the school funding formula to recognize the impact that this is having, and we need the state to go back and keep its promise to fund the Highlands impact aid formula so that municipalities can get the money they're rightfully owed.
Yeah, well, just as we're filming this, yesterday, Governor Sherrill did a fireside chat, and she took questions from the community, and one of them spoke about the S2 funding formula, and she admitted that no one likes the formula is not working, as well as her education commissioner, Lily Lowe, admitted that there are problems with the formula, but there won't be changes to the 2026 and 2027 budget. So what does that mean for these districts who, Jefferson's deficit is, millions of dollars. They're looking at cutting courtesy busing. They're looking at cutting education, closing more schools, losing more staff. This isn't sustainable.
There's no question about it. And I understand that she's only into her administration 100 days. I understand that the commissioner is new to New Jersey, and they probably feel like they're drinking out of a fire hose at this point. And I give them credit for at least admitting and being transparent that the formula is not working. But to say that we can't do anything for this cycle ignores the fact that school districts are failing all over the state of New Jersey. So, educating our kids should be our top priority, and fairness in funding to our students should be the number one priority in this budget process. And we need to give the kids the tools and the teachers the tools they need to succeed. What's scaring me is after COVID, we're seeing that our student rankings are falling. Mm-hmm. Before COVID, New Jersey was constantly ranked in the top 5 public schools in the nation, right? We were constantly ranked the top public schools in the nation. Now, I think we're down to 12, and that's partly a result of this funding formula and the problems that are existing. So this administration needs to wrap its arms around this issue and fix it. We've given them a number of suggestions on how to do that, a number of temporary fixes, some through legislation, others through just budgetary line items, but we need to do that. And we can't be giving more money to the schools in the urban areas that are already getting a major part of this money and by the way, are benefiting from the clean water that we're supplying. So we need to correct this imbalance, and we need to get a fairer distribution of the resources to our school districts that are hurting as a result of the position that S2 and the Highlands Act has put them into. And that's why we've introduced legislation. That's why we've made recommendations. But I'm concerned with the governor's statement that nothing is going to happen this year, because we lose another year, we'll continue to drop in our rankings of public schools. And that's troublesome to me, because New Jersey has always attracted families from around the country and around the world for our public school system. And we can't afford to lose that asset.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, part of what I had said at the rally was, the Highlands Impact Aid rally this past March, was that, when students lose their activities, they're not just losing the sport, right? They're losing a mentor, they're losing a coach, they're losing the foundation for what they're going to build their character on for the rest of their lives. So not only is the school then dropping in the national rankings, but our students are too, and what they go on to do for our country.
You're exactly right. Whether it's in a sports program or a music program or an arts program, and no matter what those extracurricular activities are that are being cut, define a student's future. Mm-hmm. And for them not to be able to have those opportunities is a mistake. And we've got to make sure that there's more funding, more fair funding for these school districts that just can't make it under the Highlands Act and the S2 formula as it exists today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of some of the legislation that you guys have introduced, Assembly members have signed on both sides of the aisle a bipartisan bill, A4860, which would establish emergency funds basically to all of these communities within the Highlands and the Pinelands, to get them through this next school year and budget year. And so with that in mind, could you kind of give us what process does that bill need to go through to become law?
Sure. So right now, the legislature is in the budget process. The governor has submitted her budget to the legislature, and the legislature is holding hearings on the budget with each one of the departments. And within the next couple of weeks, they will complete that budget review process. And then once the legislature does that, we will meet and we'll discuss about how the budget will ultimately look when it's voted on. In addition to the budget being voted on, there'll be legislation that's proposed that will deal with appropriations. This type of legislation will be considered during that process. But in order for it to become law, it has to go through committee in both houses, in both the Senate and the Assembly. It's to be voted out favorably in both houses and committee. And then it has to go to the floor of both houses for a vote, and both houses have to approve similar legislation with the wording being exactly the same, and then it's sent to the governor's desk, and then she'll have the ability to either sign it or veto it, or conditionally veto it, change it a little bit. Mm-hmm. But that's the process that it has to go through. And I'm hopeful that the governor is going to recognize the problem here, and she is going to address it through one of these pieces of legislation, which, by the way, I've introduced also in the Senate and had conversations with the chairman of the Senate Education Committee. And our preliminary conversations are that he will consider it and hopefully put it up in committee for a hearing. And if that occurs, then we can start to push the legislation forward a little bit more. But this is something that has to be done, and we have to get it in front of the governor for her to sign.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hopefully that happens.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too.
So to switch it up a little bit and get away from the politics side of things, the theme here on Boots to Boots is all about going from my combat boots to my wrestling boots. And everybody has that transition in part of their life and getting into a new career. But for you, not only are you actively serving as the 25th District New Jersey State Senator, you're also an active attorney. So tell us about your balance with both. And was that always your end game to become a senator?
Well, first and foremost, in New Jersey, we have a part-time legislature. It's considered part-time. I can tell you that the amount of time that I spend in my legislative role does not feel like part-time. I'm out every night. Last night I attended 3 different events, one for the New Jersey Education Association. I met with 2 nonprofit organizations for folks with developmental disabilities. So, every one of those meetings, every one of those events takes time away from me, from my profession as an attorney. So while they say it's part-time, it really does take almost a full-time approach if you do the job right as a senator. And I try to do the job right. I go to things that sometimes I'm not even invited to, just because you have to be out in the public in order to understand what's going on in your district. And quite frankly, I've been out at events where people have told me something that I didn't recognize. And as a result of the problem that we discussed, I've introduced legislation that's become law and corrected the problem. That wouldn't occur if I wasn't out in the public talking to people on a daily basis. So it is a tough balance. I mean, some nights I get home at 9, 10 o'clock and I'm on my laptop in my home answering legal questions for clients, or drafting letters or doing some legal stuff that has to get done before the next day. I'm lucky in the fact that I have great partners in my law firm that when I can't do something, they step in and they do it for me. And they're great attorneys. So, my clients never miss a beat when, if for some reason my legislative duties conflict with my law duties. So, it's a tough balance. It's very demanding to be able to try to keep a full-time schedule in both the Senate and in my law practice, but you manage it. I've been doing this now for 16 years. Wow. So, you begin to figure out how to manage it better the more experienced you get. And quite frankly, being in the legislature, the amount of time that I've been, both in the lower house and now in the Senate, you learn things. You make relationships with other senators and other legislators, and it makes the process a little bit easier. So, when I introduce legislation, I can very easily go to the other side of the aisle. They know who I am. They trust me. We have a mutual respect, and that makes it better because there's a bipartisan relationship, which gives the legislation a better chance of being passed. So it's tough. It's a tough balance, but I've been able to do it effectively, and I enjoy what I do. So I'm lucky in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, since the rally, I have followed you on social media, and he's not lying, babe, when he says he is out and taking meetings and at events. And I got lucky enough last summer to intern in a Senate office here in Orlando, Florida. And it was such an eye-opening process to see the events and be a part of that and kind of learn my community here in Orlando. And now to be able to bring that in and learn about the processes in New Jersey, I can't imagine this being called a part-time job for you, watching what you do full-time on social media. So, I mean, thank you so much for all you're doing, because it's really making a difference in the Highlands. And I know that, me, Tom Fasano, his wife, Sarah, are so grateful for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And we appreciate the fact that you took the time out of your schedules to come up and support us. I know the kids just reacted to it, and and the parents in such a great fashion. You're the role model, right? That
Thank you.
kids need to see and say, hey, you know what? Dream big and reach for the stars. And that's that's the message that kids need to have, right? They need to know that there's nothing that they can't achieve if they work hard enough and they put their mind to it and they do the work to get there. And when they see folks like you come back, they appreciate it, because they look and they say, hey, I can do this, right? I can become a doctor. I can do this type. I can be an athlete or an actress or whatever. And that's the kind of stuff that's important for kids to be able to see and appreciate. So we were so happy to know that you were coming in.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Speaking of the kids, they were at the rally, but they also took buses to Trenton just a few weeks later, and I would like to say stormed a budget committee meeting, and stood in the meeting while our school district was giving their testimony. And so how does it feel to know that the kids in your district are standing up and speaking out and engaging in this civic process?
It's great. I mean, this is what democracy is all about. I had this conversation yesterday with the folks in West Milford going through the same problem. And I explained to them that, the kids really have an impact on the legislators. And when kids come up and they testify and they tell their stories, and legislators, that really hits home, because we all have kids,
Right.
most of us kids or grandkids or both. And, it hits home for us. So the fact that they were able to do that brings their story to Trenton, and they get a history lesson out of it as well. They get to see how the process works, and they get to feel like they're part of the process. Not many kids get that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to be part of that change.
Especially when it's directly affecting them. I mean, in Jefferson Township, I'm sure it's happening in West Milford. I know it's happening in Vernon, in Wanacue, in all of the communities around it. Kids are going to lose their sports and their outlets. And, a lot of times, like, I know for you, babe, like, being able to have that took you out of a not so great home environment.
Yeah. And I lived in a single family home. My mom worked a lot. And then when she met my stepfather, they were both gone all the time with work. So it was just kind of on me. So I was lucky enough to have those after school programs, have sports to dive into and just kind of have that escape, but also keep me out of trouble. And once those programs are gone, like, what happens for kids? Because that's usually what saves sometimes. I didn't like school very much. I wasn't very much the edge. Like, I didn't like going to math or history class, but I loved seeing my friends going to play and then go to sports. And that's what kind of helped me excel in life and let me instill my life into the Marine Corps, enlist for my country. And then also now being a professional wrestler, it's like everything I learned as a kid is what got me to where I am now. And without those programs, I probably wouldn't be where I am.
Well, look, thank you for your service. And let me say this, that you are exactly right, right? Not every kid is built to go on to, a higher education. Every kid is different. And, I say this all the time, you want your children to do what they love. Mm-hmm. And if they do that, they'll succeed. And that's why having these programs available are so critically important. It's not only for the gifted athletes, it's for the kids that just want to get out there and be a part of a team, mm-hmm. right? That's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are ready to wrap up. We're so grateful for your time thus far, but we just have one more question. We always like to end with, a message for our listeners. And I think right now it's for families across the entire state of New Jersey. Whether it's the Highlands, the cities, the Pinelands, they all want the same thing. We're all fighting for the same thing: strong schools, stable opportunities, and a future for their children, regardless of the zip code. And so as this conversation continues within those communities and within the legislature, what message do you want the Highlands families to hear right now?
I want them to hear a message of hope. Their story is getting out there. The message is being delivered. And quite frankly, they've got a great legislative team. And I'm not just saying that because it's me, but we're all working together, right? Republicans and Democrats working together to try to fix this problem. So, when you have that, that's a cocktail for success. And I think they need to have hope and they need to continue to fight, right? Just because looks like we keep moving forward doesn't mean you stop the fight. They've got to continue to fight. They've got to continue to be vocal. They've got to continue to be involved. And we will continue to fight on their behalf in Trenton.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Tell us where everyone can follow you and follow this legislative process on social media and keep up with what's going on in the Highlands right now.
Sure. And just log on to my Facebook page, Senator Anthony Bucco, or just Anthony Bucco. And they can follow me on Facebook and they'll see the posts and they'll see what's going on in Trenton.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And let me know when you're out in this area.
Absolutely. We'll be back soon and we want to get you to a show.
Good. I would love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying Boots to Boots, let us know.
Lace up your boots and join the conversation.
Like, subscribe, leave us a comment,
And
we'll be talking to you.